It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Niccolo Machiavelli, they tell you to be yourself, a comforting lie for the compliant. They celebrate authenticity while silently judging those who deviate from the norm. They reward conformity disguised as self-expression. This is not a path to power. This is a gilded cage where your true self is carefully curated and controlled by the expectations of others. Your instincts, raw and untamed, are liabilities in their game. To truly master your destiny, you must first understand the art of strategic soul surrender. This is not about losing yourself entirely. It is about shedding the illusions of identity that hold you back, about forging a new persona, a weapon honed for the specific battles you choose to fight. A chameleon adapts to its environment, not by stubbornly remaining itself, but by seamlessly blending into the landscape, becoming an invisible predator. The ego screams, resisting this transformation. It clings to the familiar, to the comforting narrative of who you think you are. But the ego is a fragile thing, easily manipulated, easily broken. True strength lies not in its preservation, but in its calculated dismantling. Consider the actor, fully immersing themselves in a role, temporarily abandoning their own personality to embody another. This is a microcosm of the strategic soul surrender. They understand that identity is a construct, a performance, and that the most skilled performers are those who can convincingly portray any character, even one that is diametrically opposed to their own nature. You must learn to do the same, not for the sake of deception, but for the sake of liberation. To break free from the chains of expectation, to transcend the limitations of your perceived self, and to become a force of pure, unadulterated will. This requires a ruthless self-assessment, an honest appraisal of your strengths and weaknesses, your desires and fears. You must identify the aspects of your personality that are holding you back, the ingrained habits and beliefs that are sabotaging your progress. And then, with cold, surgical precision, you must excise them. This is not a painless process. It requires facing uncomfortable truths about yourself, acknowledging your flaws and confronting your inner demons. But the reward is worth the price. On the other side of this crucible lies a new self, forged in the fires of self-awareness and tempered by the will to change. A self that is not defined by the past, but driven by the future. A self that is not bound by the expectations of others, but guided by its own sovereign purpose. The psychology of strategic soul surrender hinges on a profound understanding of the self as a fluid and adaptable entity, rather than a fixed and immutable one. Most people cling to a rigid sense of identity, defining themselves by their past experiences, their social roles, and their deeply held beliefs. This attachment to the self creates vulnerability, making them predictable and easily manipulated. To surrender the soul in this context is not an act of weakness or self-destruction, but rather a deliberate and calculated dismantling of these limiting constructs. It is the recognition that the self is a tool, a mask, that can be shaped and molded to achieve specific objectives. This requires a detachment from the ego, a willingness to step outside of the familiar confines of one's own personality and to embrace the unfamiliar. Think of a chameleon, seamlessly blending into its surroundings by altering its appearance. This is not simply mimicry, but a deep understanding of the environment and a conscious adaptation to it. Similarly, the practitioner of strategic soul surrender must develop a keen awareness of the social landscape and the ability to adapt their persona to navigate it effectively. This involves suppressing certain aspects of their personality, amplifying others, and even adopting entirely new traits and behaviors. It is a form of psychological shape-shifting, allowing them to become all things to all people, to gain their trust, and to influence their actions. This is not to suggest that one should become a complete sociopath, devoid of genuine emotion or empathy. Rather, it is a matter of cultivating a strategic detachment, of recognizing that emotions can be powerful tools, but also dangerous liabilities. The ability to control and manipulate one's own emotions, to project the desired image, is essential for mastering the art of strategic soul surrender. It requires a constant monitoring of one's own internal state, a vigilance against the intrusion of unwanted feelings or impulses. Imagine a master spy, tasked with infiltrating a hostile organization. They must adopt a false identity, convincingly portray a role, and maintain their composure under immense pressure. Any slip-up, any momentary lapse in character could expose them and jeopardize the entire mission. Similarly, the practitioner of strategic soul surrender must be prepared to maintain their facade, even in the face of adversity. This demands a high degree of self-discipline, mental fortitude, and emotional resilience. The ultimate goal is not to erase the self entirely, but to transcend its limitations, to become a master of self-representation, capable of wielding their identity as a weapon in the game of power. The ability to adopt a new persona, to convincingly play a role, becomes a tool for navigating complex social situations and achieving strategic objectives. This requires a deep understanding of human psychology, the ability to read people's emotions and motivations, and the skill to manipulate their perceptions. Consider the example of a negotiator seeking to broker a peace agreement between two warring factions. They must be able to empathize with both sides, to understand their grievances and their aspirations, and to find common ground. However, they must also be able to maintain their objectivity, to avoid becoming emotionally invested in the outcome, and to make strategic decisions based on rational analysis. This requires a detachment from their own personal biases and a willingness to adopt different perspectives. They may need to appear sympathetic to one side, while subtly influencing the other, to create the conditions for a successful negotiation. This is a delicate balancing act, requiring a high degree of skill and finesse. Strategic soul surrender is not about becoming a different person, but about expanding one's repertoire of personas to become more adaptable, more resilient, and more effective in the pursuit of one's goals. It is about mastering the art of self-creation, of consciously shaping one's identity to achieve strategic advantage. The power lies in the ability to choose who you want to be, to present the version of yourself that is most likely to achieve the desired outcome, and to shed that persona when it is no longer needed. This requires a constant self-assessment, a willingness to learn from one's mistakes, and a commitment to continuous improvement. The strategic soul surrender is a lifelong process of self-discovery and self-mastery, a journey towards becoming the architect of one's own destiny. It's recognizing that true strength is not found in clinging to a fixed identity, but in the ability to adapt, to evolve, and to become the master of one's own narrative. Consider the case of a seasoned politician embroiled in a scandal that threatens to unravel their career. Accusations of corruption and abuse of power swirl around them, fueled by a relentless media and a baying public. Their natural inclination might be to fight back, to deny the allegations, to defend their reputation with unwavering force. However, a strategic soul surrender demands a different approach. Instead of vehemently denying everything, they might choose to acknowledge certain failings, to express remorse for the errors in judgment, and to offer a path towards redemption. This is not an admission of guilt, but a calculated maneuver to regain control of the narrative. By appearing humble and contrite, they disarm their opponents, softening their attacks and creating an opportunity to negotiate a more favorable outcome. They might even offer to step down from a position of power, sacrificing a battle to win the war. This apparent self-sacrifice is not a sign of weakness, but a demonstration of strategic foresight. It allows them to preserve their long-term influence, to rebuild their reputation, and to position themselves for a future comeback. The key is to understand the underlying dynamics of the situation, to identify the vulnerabilities of their opponents, and to exploit the weaknesses in the public's perception. This requires a cold, calculating assessment of the political landscape, a willingness to set aside personal pride, and a ruthless commitment to achieving their ultimate goals. The politician might engage in a series of carefully orchestrated public appearances, showcasing their commitment to reform and their willingness to learn from their mistakes. They might collaborate with journalists to shape the narrative, subtly shifting the focus away from the accusations and towards their positive contributions. They might even enlist the support of influential figures who can vouch for their character and their integrity. All of this requires a deep understanding of human psychology, a mastery of the art of persuasion, and an unwavering focus on the desired outcome. The strategic soul surrender is not about abandoning one's principles, but about temporarily adopting a different persona to achieve a specific objective. It's about recognizing that sometimes the most effective way to win is to appear to lose. It's about understanding that true power lies not in rigid adherence to a fixed identity, but in the ability to adapt, to evolve, and to strategically manipulate the perceptions of others. The politician in this scenario isn't truly surrendering their soul. They are simply shedding a skin, a persona that has become a liability. They are crafting a new image, a new narrative, designed to resonate with the public and regain their trust. This requires a deep understanding of what the public wants to see, what they want to believe, and what they are willing to forgive. It's about tapping into the collective psyche, understanding the underlying emotions, and strategically manipulating those emotions to achieve a desired outcome. The process is akin to a chameleon changing its colors to blend in with its surroundings, or a master chess player sacrificing a pawn to gain a strategic advantage. It requires foresight, calculation, and a willingness to make difficult choices. The politician must be prepared to face criticism, to endure public scrutiny, and to weather the storm of negativity. They must maintain a steely resolve, an unwavering focus on their ultimate goal, and a deep understanding of the strategic principles that underpin their actions. The ability to strategically surrender one's soul is a mark of true power, a testament to one's ability to adapt, to evolve, and to ultimately control one's own destiny. The trap lies in mistaking genuine vulnerability for strategic surrender. The weak often believe that simply revealing their flaws, admitting their mistakes, or aligning themselves with popular sentiment is a shortcut to power. They fail to understand that true strategic surrender is a carefully calculated maneuver, a deliberate manipulation of perception designed to achieve a specific outcome. The weak, however, operate from a place of desperation, their actions driven by a desire for approval, acceptance, or simply to avoid conflict. They readily sacrifice their principles, their values, and their very sense of self in a misguided attempt to appease others. This is not strategy, it is capitulation, a flickering candle flame in a hurricane. The critical distinction lies in the intent and the underlying power dynamic. The strategic actor surrenders from a position of strength, knowing that their perceived weakness is a temporary facade, a tool to be wielded for future advantage. The weak, on the other hand, surrender from a position of weakness, their actions born of fear and a lack of self-belief. They are akin to a cornered animal, lashing out in desperation, or a shipwrecked sailor clinging to a piece of driftwood, hoping to be rescued. Their surrender is not a calculated move. It is an act of submission, a desperate plea for mercy. The master deceiver sees the chessboard, the pawn does not. Furthermore, the weak often fail to grasp the importance of control. Strategic surrender requires a meticulous understanding of the narrative, a careful crafting of the image being presented to the world. The actor dictates the terms of their own perceived defeat, shaping the narrative to their advantage. The weak, however, relinquish control entirely, allowing others to define them, to dictate their actions, and to ultimately control their fate. They become puppets in a play, their strings pulled by unseen forces, their voices silenced by the weight of their own insecurities. Like rats in a cage, they only see the immediate threat, never the architect of their prison. The consequences of this fundamental misunderstanding are dire. While the strategic actor gains power through calculated surrender, the weak only further entrench their own powerlessness. They become increasingly dependent on the approval of others, their self-esteem eroding with each act of self-betrayal. They lose the ability to think critically, to act decisively, and to assert their own will in the world. They devolve into shadows of their former selves, hollow echoes of what they once aspired to be. They are like wind-up toys, their springs unwound, forever trapped in a cycle of submission and self-destruction. In essence, the weak fail because they confuse authenticity with vulnerability, compromise with capitulation, and strategic retreat with abject surrender. They lack the necessary self-awareness, the strategic foresight, and the unwavering resolve to navigate the complex landscape of power dynamics. They are easily manipulated, easily swayed, and easily defeated. The chess pieces move them. The strong may feign defeat, the weak embrace it as their natural state. This embrace is their undoing, their fatal flaw, the chink in their armor that allows the wolves to feast. They surrender not a soul, but any semblance of self-respect. The Machiavellian approach to strategic soul surrender begins with a brutal assessment. The self is not sacred. It is a tool, an instrument, a vehicle for the attainment of power. Emotions are data points, not drivers. Morality is a stage prop, not a guiding principle. This is not to advocate for nihilism, but for a radical detachment from the sentimental attachments that cloud judgment and impede strategic action. The strong player understands that the ego is a liability, a fragile construct that can be easily shattered by criticism, rejection, or failure. Therefore, the ego must be subdued, disciplined, and when necessary, sacrificed for the greater strategic objective. This requires a deep understanding of one's own weaknesses, vulnerabilities, and blind spots. It demands an unflinching willingness to confront the darkest aspects of the self, to acknowledge the flaws and insecurities that others may exploit. Only then can one begin to construct a strategy of calculated surrender, one that leverages these vulnerabilities to gain an advantage. The core principle of this strategy is to offer up what is least valuable in order to protect what is most essential. It is a process of strategic divestment, of shedding those aspects of the self that are most likely to be attacked or compromised. This may involve concealing one's true ambitions, feigning ignorance or incompetence, or even adopting a false persona that aligns with the expectations of others. The goal is not to become a fundamentally different person, but to create a smokescreen that obscures one's true intentions and allows one to operate with greater freedom and flexibility. Imagine a skilled card player who deliberately misplays a hand to lull their opponents into a false sense of security. They sacrifice a small advantage in the short term to gain a larger advantage in the long term. Similarly, the strategic actor may willingly accept temporary setbacks or humiliations to achieve their ultimate goals. This process is not without risk. It requires a high degree of self-control, discipline, and awareness. It demands the ability to maintain a clear distinction between one's true self and the persona that one presents to the world. It also requires a keen understanding of human psychology, the ability to anticipate the reactions of others and to manipulate their perceptions. The strategic actor must be a master of deception, a skilled manipulator, and a ruthless pragmatist. They must be willing to do whatever it takes to achieve their objectives, even if it means sacrificing their own pride, dignity, or reputation. Think of a general who orders a tactical retreat, sacrificing territory to consolidate their forces and lure the enemy into a trap. The retreat may appear to be a sign of weakness, but it is in fact a calculated maneuver designed to achieve a decisive victory. The key difference between strategic soul surrender and abject submission lies in the intent. The weak surrender because they lack the strength to resist. The strong surrender because they have a plan. Their surrender is not an end in itself, but a means to an end. It is a calculated risk, a strategic gamble that is designed to pay off in the long run. They understand that true power lies not in brute force or dominance, but in the ability to control the narrative, to manipulate perceptions, and to orchestrate events to their advantage. They are the puppet masters, not the puppets. They are the architects of their own destiny, not the victims of circumstance. The surrender is a carefully crafted illusion, a stage performance designed to deceive and disarm their opponents. Like a snake shedding its skin, the strategic actor discards those aspects of the self that no longer serve a purpose, emerging stronger, more resilient, and more adaptable. The Machiavellian approach also acknowledges the importance of adaptability. The world is constantly changing, and the strategic actor must be able to adapt to these changes in order to survive and thrive. This requires a willingness to abandon outdated strategies, to embrace new ideas, and to continuously refine one's understanding of the world. It demands a flexible mindset, the ability to think critically, and the courage to challenge conventional wisdom. The strategic actor is not bound by tradition or dogma, but is guided by reason, observation, and experience. They are constantly experimenting, learning, and evolving, always seeking new and better ways to achieve their goals. They understand that the only constant is change, and that those who fail to adapt will inevitably be left behind. This adaptability extends to the surrender itself. The strong strategically shed old values and opinions, like a soldier discarding heavy gear to move faster across the battlefield. In practice, this might involve publicly supporting a cause that one privately despises, forming alliances with individuals whom one distrusts, or even feigning incompetence to lower expectations. The strategic actor is willing to compromise their principles, betray their friends, or even sacrifice their own personal well-being in the pursuit of power. They are driven by a single-minded focus on achieving their objectives, and they are willing to do whatever it takes to succeed. This is not to say that they are devoid of morals or ethics, but that they prioritize strategic considerations above all else. They believe that the ends justify the means, and that the pursuit of power is a necessary evil in a world of constant competition and conflict. They see the world as a chessboard, and they are determined to win the game, even if it means sacrificing a few pawns along the way. They understand the game is already brutal, and pretending otherwise only invites destruction. The ultimate goal of strategic soul surrender is not merely to survive, but to thrive. It is to achieve a position of power and influence, to control one's own destiny, and to leave a lasting mark on the world. The strategic actor is not content to be a passive observer, but seeks to actively shape the course of events. They are ambitious, driven, and relentless in their pursuit of success. They are willing to take risks, to challenge the status quo, and to push the boundaries of what is possible. They are the architects of their own lives, and they are determined to build a legacy that will endure long after they are gone. They do not seek comfort or acceptance, but respect and power. They understand that true fulfillment comes not from external validation, but from the knowledge that they have achieved their full potential and left their mark on the world. The paradox of strategic soul surrender is that it ultimately leads to greater self-mastery. By detaching from the ego, by confronting one's weaknesses, and by embracing adaptability, the strategic actor develops a deeper understanding of themselves and the world around them. They become more resilient, more resourceful, and more effective in their pursuit of their goals. They learn to control their emotions, to manage their impulses, and to think strategically in all situations. They become masters of their own minds, able to manipulate their own thoughts and feelings to achieve their desired outcomes. This self-mastery is the ultimate source of power, the foundation upon which all other forms of power are built. It is the key to unlocking one's full potential and achieving lasting success in a world of constant competition and conflict. Through calculated sacrifice, they rise. They embrace their inner Machiavelli, the architect of their own ascendancy. Strategic soul surrender, therefore, is not an act of weakness, but a calculated maneuver. It is the conscious shedding of those parts of oneself that hinder progress, the deliberate offering of vulnerabilities as bait for strategic advantage. Imagine a chess player sacrificing a pawn to open a vital line of attack. The pawn is lost, yes, but the position is gained. Similarly, the strategic actor understands that certain aspects of the self, pride, sentimentality, the need for validation, can be willingly sacrificed to achieve a more significant objective. This is not about self-destruction, but about self-optimization. It is about identifying the non-essential, the burdensome, the easily exploited, and consciously relinquishing it for the sake of overall advancement. The process demands ruthless self-assessment. One must dissect their own motivations, identify their emotional triggers, and acknowledge their cognitive biases. Where are you predictable? Where are you easily wounded? Where do you cling to illusions that serve only to comfort, not to empower? These are the areas ripe for strategic surrender. They are the weaknesses that can be exploited by adversaries, the vulnerabilities that can be leveraged against you. By acknowledging them, by understanding them intimately, you can begin to control them. You can transform liabilities into assets, weaknesses into strengths. Furthermore, strategic soul surrender necessitates a willingness to adapt. The world is in constant flux, and the rigid, inflexible mind is destined to break. The strategic actor must be like water, flowing around obstacles, adapting to the contours of the terrain. This requires a degree of detachment from one's own identity, a willingness to discard old beliefs and embrace new perspectives. It means being open to the possibility that you are wrong, that your assumptions are flawed, that your strategies are outdated. It means constantly reassessing your position, adjusting your course, and remaining vigilant for new opportunities and threats. Consider the master negotiator, willing to concede minor points to secure a larger victory. They understand that compromise is not a sign of weakness, but a strategic tool. They are willing to give up something of lesser value to gain something of greater value. Similarly, the strategic actor must be willing to make concessions in their personal life, to sacrifice short-term gratification for long-term gain. They may need to relinquish certain relationships, abandon certain pursuits, or even alter their own personality to achieve their goals. This is not to suggest that one should become a chameleon, constantly changing to please others. Rather, it is about cultivating a core of unwavering purpose, a deep-seated commitment to one's own goals, and then adapting one's behavior and strategies to effectively pursue those goals. It is about remaining true to oneself while simultaneously being willing to evolve and adapt. It is about finding the balance between authenticity and adaptability. Ultimately, strategic soul surrender is about power. It is about taking control of one's own destiny, shaping one's own reality, and achieving one's full potential. It is about mastering the art of self-manipulation, using one's own weaknesses and vulnerabilities to one's advantage. It is about becoming a force to be reckoned with, an individual who is capable of achieving anything they set their mind to. It is the path to true sovereignty, the path to becoming the architect of your own existence. The strategic actor does not seek external validation. They forge their own path and command their own destiny. Therefore, analyze